Hello and welcome back to another episode of Progressive Mindset, the podcast for entrepreneurs looking to progress themselves and their businesses. I'm Bradley Monday.
And I am Jason Kemsley. And I guess really before we jump into this week's topic, just acknowledging that we've been a bit poor at the uploads in the last couple of weeks, which feels like a quarter or a year. And I feel like it's important to explain why, because we have been on that treadmill that everyone is on. We've been on the grind, some of the millennials call it, the hamster wheel, maybe I'd refer it to it. But we've had a couple of very, very busy weeks, challenging, obstacles, what you really get into as an entrepreneur, finding the next problem to overcome, get better from. And so we haven't been able to do one of these, right?
No, absolutely. I think you've got to look after the business, and these kind of things unfortunately come second. But across that couple of weeks that we haven't, that we've been back, really in the business, I think there's been, some highs, some lows. This last week, quite a few lows. It's felt like a really, really challenging week, and that's really brought us to today's topic, where we're going to cover off the highs and lows and managing those experiences and those emotions as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely, and I guess full disclosure out the gate. If you listen to previous episodes, you probably won't be super shocked. Quite an emotional, heart on my sleeve character. So this is something that I have battled with quite significantly. You have a high maybe on a Friday. You go into the weekend. You feel like the world is the best place ever. Oh my God, I'm so lucky. And then you hit a low, but the vertical drop is absolutely staggering. And so I feel the highs and I feel the lows quite significantly. And I wanted to share something I've been working on, which hasn't worked very well, but I think that's more my application than maybe the rule itself, which is the 24-hour rule, which is simply you are allowed 24 hours to celebrate or to feel positive after that high, but you're also only allowed 24 hours to sulk after the low. Because definitely, as you reflect and look back, the sulks, the lows, they can last for quite a while. I find the highs I sort of come down from quite quickly.
Because you go in search of the next one, right?
Absolutely. As an entrepreneur, you're trying to push the barrier, right? That's the cool thing about this, is you don't accept what is possible. You see how far you can push it.
Strive, yeah.
But the lows you can drag out. I've probably dragged lows out for a month before, I suspect, but it can affect your motivation, it can affect your productivity, your dedication, etc. Whereas I think you've got quite a perfect balance of consistency with yours.
And so it's something that I've worked on. A lot of it comes naturally. I've just one of those sorts of people.
I'm just naturally great.
No. It's I naturally don't look super happy and pleased when I'm celebrating a win or something along those lines. I'm fairly consistent in that output or at the outlook, but I think it's really important to be something that you tackle quite early on when you have a team.
Yep.
Because if you go into a low, you're having a challenging day, and you're expressing that can then bring your team down. It has a significant business impact when you as a leader are putting out there that negativity. But at the same time, it's very important that when there is something to celebrate, actually those moments in business can be quite hard to come by, and that you do celebrate that with your team. So I've had to find other outlets for that to almost formalize that process of celebrating a win, so that everyone else can contribute to that, because I don't naturally put it out there.
And it reminds me of, there are endless entrepreneurial leadership style people on TikTok, YouTube, and everywhere else. And one thing that I do think resonates amongst all of them that I've seen is this concept of, you touched upon it a bit earlier, of only thinking or worrying about the stuff that you can control or influence.
Oh, I completely agree.
Which is definitely is synonymous with, you know, those really low lows. Is you're worrying about stuff you couldn't have had an impact on or couldn't have changed. And so that it really kind of comes back to that for me, is what can I control, what can I change? Well, actually, if you can't control the thing that's led to that emotion, what you can control is how you recover from it or rebound from it.
Yeah, indeed. And what you're describing there is just mental resiliency.
Yep.
Which I think is not something you just switch on. It's something you do have to work out at, and you do have to build over time. But just that ability to go, I couldn't have affected that, and therefore I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to stew over it. And I think it is a process. It's something that, whilst I'm very good at it during the day, it's when I try and go to sleep at night. That's where the stuff that I can't control, that's where it gets me.
Okay.
You know, something happened, someone did something that you can't control your mind. There's nothing to sort of, I guess, distract you. And maybe in terms of tips and tricks, that's definitely something that I use to overcome that. I couldn't control it, or there's nothing I could do now.
Yep.
Let's learn from it and let's move on. But distract yourself with that drive forwards is a great way of stopping those emotions from coming through and controlling your day.
And so I was thinking before this about tips and tricks. I think one of my biggest things that impacted finding a bit more consistency is more outside of work things. So having a round of golf, having a gym session, eating well, having some sort of outlet outside of Monday to Friday or whatever day it is, to recognise. So now when I am not feeling particularly great about the day, I'll try and make sure to get to the gym just to create that endorphin rush. And I think as we all progress, right, as individuals, and we learn more, and you've fired someone or you've given someone a promotion, if you're experiencing these business lessons, you have to think about, what can I do to come back from that quicker? Because that dead time is useless time.
Yeah, you need. Yeah, if you're not productive and you're not putting out the right emotions and energy to your team, then remove yourself from it. Right.
Yeah.
So maybe bring that gym session forwards a bit. Just go and do it at a lunchtime or something, so that you can come back with renewed energy.
That's a good idea, that one. And I wanted to talk about, because I think it's important. I think being super high and super low, there is some sort of correlation between someone that does that and the increased likelihood of burnout, the increased likelihood of stress management being a bit more difficult. So I think there is more to this than just being productive as much as you can, being as balanced as much as you can. This is also about setting up for longevity. As an entrepreneur, you don't, 99.9% do not experience what the famous ones do, where, you know, they reach a goal and then they can step back. You're going to be working till you're 60, 65 or whatever. So trying to create some sort of practice for longevity. Mm-hmm. I see so many leaders that the way in which they act, they couldn't possibly sustain for the next 40 years.
So bringing that into sort of highs and lows, perhaps don't celebrate the highs too early. And I think we've all been guilty of going, I've just sent the contract out for $100,000. It's coming. I can't wait. And we're getting all excited and we're getting all hyped up. One of the things that I learned pretty early is actually that's a real way to have that pendulum swinging both ways, because when it gets delayed or it doesn't quite happen in the time frame that you spent, suddenly you swing the other way, really quite violently.
Yep.
And perhaps just going, you know what? Yes, it's great that I've got that contract out there, but let's not celebrate until it's got a signature on it. Yeah,
and I guess that's the that's a line, right? When you're super passionate about what you do, that's a if there's anything else in the world you're passionate about, you get excited about the idea about playing football at the weekend.
Yeah.
Then you get excited when the whistle goes, and then you get excited when you get a chance. And so I think actually there is a second point to this. You can't be super emotional about the business you're in.
No, for sure, I agree with that. But just before we lose your analogy there, you only celebrate when you win in that analogy, right? You talked about excitement and the building of the excitement and the experience of excitement across several different stages. But you didn't mention any celebration. You didn't, so let's get excited.
Maybe that was my problem. Well, I wasn't very good at us celebrating the starting whistle.
Yeah, absolutely. But you use the momentum. I think to the creation of energy that you get from, we've just made a great hire, we just sent out the contract, all of those things. Use the energy to drive forwards. But one, if you haven't celebrated, then when it gets taken away from you, if it gets taken away from you, you get disappointment, but you probably don't get. It's like a sugar crash.
Yep.
Yeah. It's you've got that hard come down when the sugar gets taken away from you, whereas you don't have don't have the sugar, and try and use energy to propel you forward in whatever task you're moving on to next. And then celebrate when the contract's signed. Celebrate when that great employee gets through their first couple of weeks and starts to really demonstrate their promise.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I know, I agree with that. And then there was a bit, I've wrote it on the whiteboard. We have a whiteboard in front of us. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me pointing at, which is something, the 24-hour rule didn't work too well. I didn't apply it necessarily well. I think being more of an emotional personality as opposed to maybe what that requires from someone, I think that would probably work with someone like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I needed something a bit more emotion based, I think, so that when I'm in that moment, the first thing I'm thinking about is emotions. So if I had an emotion based logic, I'd find it easier to apply. And I found this one, which was rather than striving to be happy or rather than striving to be productive, strive to be proud.
Okay.
And so this was a big thing for me when I found it. Or at least I think it is. I'll let others comment, but trying to find, there's so much content, we've talked about this many times, trying to find the type of person you are. If you suffer from the highs and lows of business, going to learn something from Elon Musk is not probably going to be the right thing for you, because I suspect he's a very different character. He doesn't strike me as a hugely emotional person.
So you're talking about going out there and finding someone that you resonate with in terms of their personality.
Absolutely, which is why I think this topic for you that is quite consistent and me that is quite up and down is a super beautiful thing for listeners, because they can see both sides.
Yeah, okay.
I had to find an emotion-based logic.
And so how have you, talk us through how you've applied that and how that's worked for you?
So last week, usually on Friday, it would have got to, it's hindsight, right? But on Friday, I would have let the low of the week leak into the weekend. Mm-hmm. I knew that we're going away for work the next weekend, and I thought to myself, how can I be proud of what I do for my family, my partner, whatever, this weekend, so that going into next week, I feel positive, I've done the right stuff or whatever. That means today I feel as motivated as I normally would. Coming off the back of last week, a year ago, I probably would be very low motivation today, I would have thought.
You let it leak into the next week.
But because I'm emotional, my brain can't compute the idea of not wanting to be proud, because I'm an emotional person.
Okay.
So that hits me. Whereas I think something like the 24-hour rule for you, if you need to apply something, you are quite mentally resilient in terms of, right, well, I'll start this now, I'll stop this now.
Yeah, and you move on. Absolutely. So I'm just trying to work out how you apply the being proud to a problem that you're stewing over a problem. Let's say let's go back to the big contract. So the big contract was coming in. You just found out that for whatever reason they've shelved the project.
Yep.
It's not coming in anymore. Obviously, you can have some emotion around that. You put a lot of work in, so you're just generally just sort of a bit angry, a bit agitated. How do you use pride to control that emotion?
So it's not to control the emotion, it's to create the subsequent emotion. So in that scenario, if it was used effectively, you wouldn't celebrate that moment, because you'd want to really celebrate that moment and really be proud when it does come. Because if you celebrate early, it dilutes the secondary.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
I'm not sure I follow, and I want to make sure that our listeners, our viewers follow as well. So in that moment, there's nothing to celebrate because you've lost the contract.
Oh, sorry, you've lost it.
You've lost the contract. Contract's gone. The project's been shelved.
Yep.
On the Friday, and that's obviously caused all of those negative emotions that come with something that you couldn't control and you knew was right for the customer.
Yep.
They're just not going forward for whatever reason, and you've got to find a way of being. How do you apply the pride to either stop and allow you to move on? Is it just filling your mind effectively with other emotions?
So it's a to myself, to family, to colleagues I care about, etc. Let me go show them how quick I can turn this into an actual positive.
Okay.
So they can go, he's the man, or whatever that may mean. In terms of I joke about, but it's the how. Let me show you how quick I can, or let me show you how this can go into this, and beating the odds essentially.
Okay.
So
you're using it like a learning experience.
Absolutely.
You're effectively moving
but as a
on.
jump board as well, as a trampoline. So if I don't know, you come and said today, right, that's gone. We're gonna have to look at the sales targets, etc., because we're gonna have to reduce them. Finding that bit of, I'm gonna show him actually. I'm gonna show him what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Going to find one even bigger to pull in, and then going, yeah, look at that, Brad. That's a proud moment because no one thought possible. We were all planning for different.
And have you? So I'm just. The reason for my hesitation is I'm just thinking that that's actually still quite a tough thing to do mentally. For someone that resonates with sort of your way of thinking, they're experiencing highs and lows. Have you got any sort of tips, tricks as to how you apply that? Because it's one thing to say, well, we just use that as a moment to be proud. We're going to move on to the next thing and you rotate that energy around and use it as a driving force. It's another thing to apply it. So have you got
to apply it? No, actually, the application came through a therapist. The application of it, and I don't quite know how he got me into this point of applying it so consistently. But it all started with trying to train my brain that whenever I was in a moment of emotion, either way,
right,
that seemed, this is annoying, or this is great, I'm too high. Just as you get sort of past the middle, or just as you get over the little peak, thinking to myself, and this sounds silly and if it sounds like a therapy session, what would an adult do?
Right, okay.
That was the question I was always taught. So if you're super low and you're feeling low, what would an adult do right now? Well, an adult's going to pick themselves up. They're going to brush themselves off. Then they're going to go again. And then I've done, how do I take this and Jasonize it because I'm all in on everything?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to get up, dust myself off, but then I'm going to sprint 100 miles because that's further than everyone else.
Okay.
So I've taken what is I think a therapeutic type concept of not battling, but having a more consistent emotional base for, when I come in and I see, it could be a manager, it could be anyone, I want to be a consistent Jason with them. I don't want to be this up and down version. As they see me in a certain light, everyone sees everyone in a certain light.
Yep.
I want to be always that positive and happy version. And asking myself, what would an adult do? But then taking that into the Jason, you have to push it as far forward as you can, right? I've seen you do this, when you have a really not so optimal moment, maybe it's Friday afternoon, you've just had a really bad email, you'll have a minute or a couple of minutes where you might take yourself off, or in your head you can just see it's twirling. But it doesn't change the Brad that all the people that speak to gets.
No, and that's why I wanted to unpack that, to work out how, as someone that really feels those swings, how do you overcome it? So I guess that's a major takeaway from today's episode is it doesn't matter whether you are more consistent or whether you really feel the emotions. You have to find a way to put a stop to the negative feeling and find a way to twist that into positive drive, because I really resonate with what you said there in terms of you've had the bad email, to use your example there, and it's caused a surge of emotions and you want to react in a certain way. How do you quickly go, could I control it? Is there a way that I can swing this into a positive outcome? If not, let's shelve it, deal with it, and move on. And both of us have found different ways to handle that, but it's really, really important to do that. And I guess the celebration of highs, let's focus in on that a little bit more. I mentioned that we have a Teams channel that allows us as a business to celebrate wins, and largely I think that works for me because I'm not super up and down, and so to get that energy out when there is something to celebrate, that helps because it allows the team to rally round the, hey, I know something super positive has happened. Let's shout about it. Let's rave about it. Everyone come together for it, because I'm not going to be the hype man that's over the top, because I think you have to bring the good emotions and the bad emotions. If you've got them in check well, they do come in together.
Yep.
It's very difficult to have super highs but no lows.
And I think that's the beauty of culture, right? We've had an episode on culture and thriving cultures. Is the culture is what the leader, whatever title you want to give whatever person, typically has instilled.
Yep.
If the person at the front of the ship is the person that's screaming and yelling, that's the culture that typically trickles down.
It trickles down, yeah.
What I think we've got a really nice culture is a blend of both of us.
Mm-hmm.
As a team, we hate it when something crappy happens. More so than I would suggest most businesses. Like, everyone will feel it and go, that sucks. They care more than, I guess, a traditional business.
That's the pride thing coming through though, right? As a team, we're proud of what we deliver.
And that's a great culture in some ways, that as long as it doesn't last for too long. But in the inverse, you then have the bit that you've pushed on it, which is let's celebrate even the small things. Let's celebrate the big things. Let's make sure that they're all being noticed and it's not just super lows, because
of course
you need the juxtaposition. You need the low.
Absolutely got to be a balance,
followed by the high. And I would suggest, I don't know this, but I would suggest that some of the very modern businesses, the Zoom, the Teslas, Microsoft, etc., probably perfect a balance of both of these. Everyone is super accountable, super targeted, questioned on why they didn't reach targets, interrogated almost, but they also highly reward. They also highly celebrate. So it does balance out quite nicely.
Absolutely, and that's definitely a subject that we've got on the list for podcasts is how not to be a feel-good leader. It's not about being super positive when there is no positive.
Yep.
But it's about having balance, like you've just said. So we'll cover that in a future episode.
And finally, we're uploading again. So thanks very much. It's going to back to weekly. So we look forward to seeing what people think and back on YouTube, etc. And until next week, thank you very much for listening.
We'll see you on the next one.